OpenAI just announced that their incredibly popular Deep Research tool is now available for free. Previously worth $200 a month, this is a game changer for anyone who's looking to learn and research more effectively. Deep Research AI tools have become one of the most popular ways to use artificial intelligence, and with good reason. They save a ton of time, energy, and money, literally saving me hundreds of hours each month. In today's video, I'll explore not only ChatGPT's Deep Research tool, but I'll also compare it against other incredibly popular tools, like Gemini, Perplexity, and NotebookLM. I'll share pros and cons and tips on how you can use the free version of each of these tools most effectively. Hi, my name is Callum, also known as Wanderloots, and welcome to today's video on AI Deep Research tools, a comparison of the most popular tools and how you can use each of these tools in their free tiers most effectively. Deep Research is one of my favorite ways to use artificial intelligence, so I'm really pumped that ChatGPT now has this feature available on their free version. But that said, there are some limitations with this one and limitations with the other tools. So I'm going to walk through a comparison on how these tools fit together to construct my perfect learning system and my perfect research system. In my comparison, I also test how long each tool takes to get the results with some surprising answers. Here's what I'll cover today: an explanation of the benefits of deep research, a comparison of the three most popular deep research tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity, an example use of each tool running the same test prompt and analyzing the results, how I use NotebookLM to aggregate deep research information and discover sources, which is a bit different than deep research but much faster. I'll also share briefly a few other research tools like Zotero and Obsidian that help me tie my learning system together. Finally, I'll give some of the best example use cases I envision using this tool for, along with my tips and tricks on how to use these tools together more effectively so you can save time, effort, and money. Reminder to please like and subscribe if you find this video helpful, as I'm working on building out YouTube to be my full-time career, so your support means a lot to me. Now, let's dive into deep research. Okay, so to get started, I thought it would be helpful to actually take a look at the benefits of using this deep research tool and why so many people are finding it incredibly helpful. The first benefit is that it saves a ton of time, and I don't say that lightly. Each deep research you do could save you 10 or 20 hours of scrolling hundreds or thousands of websites, condensing all that information into one place, and then displaying the information in a very easily digestible way with reference to all of the other sources. It's honestly an incredible tool that I use all the time. The second major benefit is that it gives you those sources. It's not just condensing information from some generic LLM like ChatGPT used to do with no reference to where it's getting the information from. Instead, it actually compiles all of those sources in one place and gives you links to them, citations, so you can go back and check the credibility of the resources if you want to, or do a deeper dive into specific resources that have been the most helpful. And the third major benefit is that these models use what's called multi-step reasoning, or chain of thought, where they actually are able to significantly improve the quality of the output of the research by taking the information and then analyzing it in a series of steps, condensing, compiling, synergizing the information into a much more effective output for you to read. That said, there are some cons to using tools like this. You do have to be very careful with the information that you're uploading, depending on where you're getting the information from. If it's confidential client work, for example, or potentially your business information that you might not want these companies to use in their training models. You have to be careful of privacy and what you're actually uploading, which is why I tend to use NotebookLM for uploading my own sources, but I'll explain that more in a little bit. And also another major limitation is that you can only do a few searches per month with ChatGPT, but again, I'll explain some strategies on how to overcome these limitations at the end of the video when I synthesize my entire research system together based on using all of these tools. Okay, so when I first go to chatgpt.com, you can see already I have access to this deep research. And as soon as I highlight over this, you can see that it says there's only 5 available until May 26th. So I just wanted to, before I even start showing you how to use this, point out that it has that limitation of only 5 searches. So if you go over to the Deep Research FAQ on OpenAI.com, you can see that as part of the free tier, you only get 5 tasks per month using the lightweight version. Whereas if you're on the Plus and Team version, you get 10 tasks per month, plus an additional 15 with the lightweight version. And on the Pro, you get 125 tasks per month, plus an additional 125 using the lightweight version. That's pretty wild because up until today, it would have cost me $200 to get access to this deep research tool. So I'm really excited to dive into this and see how effective it actually is. But again, I just wanted to point out that limitation because I think that using this tool on the free tier at least, it's important to be strategic with how you're asking questions, because you don't want to go and just ask your basic question off the bat using deep research, perhaps, because that might be a waste of one of your 5 free deep insight generators of the month. And that was just one tip I wanted to point out about the fact that we have such limited searches. because that means that you can modify your strategy for how you're actually searching something. And this technique is one that I've been using for Gemini Deep Research, which they now have access to, and also Perplexity's Deep Research functionality. I do this as well with NotebookLM, but it's a bit of a different search functionality, so I'll explain that difference afterwards. But for now, why don't we go here, and as my first main tip, I'm going to just ask a question before enabling deep research so that I can conserve that deep research. So I thought that the best way to get going would be for me to actually just learn more about deep research AI tools across the internet so that I have an idea on when I might want to use each tool. Because I've been using Gemini and Perplexity, but I'm really excited to get access to ChatGPT and their deep research functionality, so I just want to know when I should be using which tool. Because I'm going to try and get up-to-date information here, I can either toggle on search or I can write search the web as needed. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do this type of search as my first comparison across the different tools is because I'm very interested in learning what kind of bias there is between these different tools. I think bias is an incredibly important factor to consider when you're using AI for research, because everything is being filtered through a particular LLM, everything is being filtered through a particular company's interest. So it's just very important to be aware of the bias so that you can work to neutralize it. So as an example, the top AI research tools, just for part of a basic search on ChatGPT, the first one they list is OpenAI's ChatGPT. So that's just an example of how, obviously they're going to put themselves first. Okay, and we can see here that it says the pricing is for the Plus plan, which gives you 10 deep research queries, and the Pro plan, which gives you 200. So this isn't even listing the free version, which I know I have access to because I can see it right here because I'm not currently paying for Pro or Plus. So the basic ChatGPT using the search functionality missed out on that option as the free tier. Okay, Semantic Scholar. This one sounds less like it's about a deep research tool and more just an AI academic search engine. Research Rabbit is actually a tool I use a lot. I have a video that talks about this more in depth. And it's a super great way for you to connect to tools like Zotero, which I'll also explain more in a little bit. But this isn't a deep research tool. This is a way for you to connect different research papers together. Then, nice, we get to Perplexity. This is probably my favorite deep research tool that I've been using so far. I'm really excited to see how this compares because Perplexity has a couple limitations that I'll show you in a moment when I analyze that tool. Yeah, the free plan has limited features. The pro plan is $20 a month or $200 a year. DeepSeek I haven't been using because of the potential privacy issues there. And interesting, it didn't even suggest Gemini, but I'm over in Gemini right now and I can see that I have deep research as an option. So clearly ChatGPT, using the basic search functionality, missed out on some key limitations here. But it looks good that it provided this cost overview and it did provide the sources below. Okay, so I'm just going to copy in the same question here just to see how the deep research compares exactly, though I got rid of the search the web component because by definition, the deep research has that web search functionality. But just before I click go, I want to point out that the articles that the basic web search pulled up, it had an article from 50 days ago and 206 days ago. And that's what it listed as recent developments in AI research tools. So that's pretty wild that it would be listing those tools. But all right, let's toggle deep research and hit go. Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's bringing up some clarifying questions right off the bat. It looks like answering these clarifying questions doesn't impact my ability to search. Let me just answer these one by one. Okay, so my answers were that I wanted it to focus on all different types of tools, including academic, business, scientific, and general web search. But I also want to know which tools are more effective in which area. I only want to use publicly available tools, would like comparison tables. And then I also, because it asked specifically about being able to handle documents, I want to know about the privacy policies so that I can understand how my data is going to be used, because some tools would use my input information to train their models. And depending on whether I'm using this for business or for client work, I might need that information to remain confidential. That's typically where I use NotebookLM for this type of tool because they don't use your uploaded information to train their AI models. So it has a more intense privacy policy than other tools. So I'm curious to know what it says. Okay, it says perfect, thanks for the clarification. All research publicly, etc. Basically just reframing my question, and then we'll get back to a comprehensive overview shortly. So it's currently 11 a.m. Let's see how long this takes. And honestly, this might take a while. It says it can take up to 30 minutes. Oh, and cool, it's showing the activity on the side here. So I'm curious to see if this brings up Gemini, if this brings up other tools outside of the initial ones that were just searched. So I always like with these reasoning models that you're able to actually see how the thinking process happens as you go, because it kind of gives you insight into the black box of artificial intelligence that we typically don't have access to. Okay, so you can see it's going through and just researching a ton of different options on the side here. analyzing particular articles and websites. And it's been about 5 minutes and it's about a third of the way through. Okay, so let's go over to Gemini for a moment while we're waiting for ChatGPT to do its deep research, because that can take up to half an hour. So this is also one of my strategies that I like to use AI tools. I'll use multiple tools at the same time, and then while one is going off and doing work for me on a particular topic, maybe I'll start working on a different problem with a different tool, and then I can have all of these AI tools working for me in the background. With Gemini's deep research, I believe it uses the Flash thinking model. Yep, the 2.0 Flash thinking model, so it hasn't gotten access to 2.5 yet, but that's okay. It says that it's good for planning, searching, reasoning, and reporting. So all of this sounds very similar to how ChatGPT's deep research operates. And it looks like Gemini uses an actual agentic AI agent system for breaking down the problem, doing the research, and synthesizing it. So it sounds like there's at least 3 AI agents that work together to synthesize these reports. Cool, so there's a bit more information here if you're interested in looking at it, but why don't we go right over to Gemini directly. And you can see here there's an option up on the side to switch between Gemini 2.0 Flash, 2.5 Flash Experimental, Pro Experimental, or Deep Research. So I've been using 2.5 Pro Experimental in Google AI Studio. And the reason is because Google AI Studio's 2.5 Pro abilities has been incredible for coding. So I've been using that to learn to code and to build applications, which I actually just made a video on if you're interested in learning more about how Google AI Studio works, along with the ability to live stream, generate videos, and have starter apps built. So that's a cool tool, but it doesn't have access to the deep research functionality that I'm aware of. Yeah, if I go in here, I can't toggle it. So we have to go directly through Gemini if we want to do that. Let's just paste in the exact same prompt that I gave ChatGPT just to have a better comparison. And let's see if it asks for clarifying questions or if it just takes what I put in here. Here's a research plan for the topic. If you need to update it, let me know. Okay, so I just clicked edit plan because I feel like this is an opportunity now for me to go and bring in my limitations that I put for ChatGPT just so that I have an actual better comparison. So I will say update the plan to include these considerations. Cool. So that kind of did the same thing where before it went off and did its deep researching, it asked me if I thought the plan was effective. So that's a good opportunity now for me to take some time to think. And because I believe I only have about 10 of these a month, though I'll double check that in a moment, it's worth making this upfront research plan as detailed and comprehensive and targeted as you want it to be, because that's going to enable the AI to do a better job. But let's click start research and see how it goes. Okay, and just switching back. So you can see that ChatGPT is still going. It's got this whole thread of thought on the side, chain of thought here, and it's about 75% of the way done. So again, this is a cool way where I can now have Gemini operating at the same time as ChatGPT is operating, and I can leverage the free tiers of both tools to stack my limitations that I get. Okay, so it's looking like it's understanding the user needs, initial research strategy, researching websites, key categories, deeper investigation. I mean, this is happening very fast. It looks like this is happening a lot faster than ChatGPT, but again, it's kind of hard to know exactly. This has only evaluated 32 sources so far, and Gemini has evaluated 80 websites already, or is in the process. Wow, okay, now 120. So just while I'm waiting for this to finish up here, just think about how effective this is. How long would it take you to actually go through and research 120 websites? How long would it take you to even go through 32 websites? It would take at least hours. But now, after crafting this perfect plan for myself and what I'm looking for, I can just have multiple AI tools running for me in the background, and I could go make my lunch or go for a walk and then come back and I'll have this synthesized report for me. So that's pretty cool. Just while this one is also thinking, because it looks like it's going to take a few minutes, let's go take a look at Perplexity, because Perplexity is one of my favorite AI tools. It's perplexity.ai, and it does a really solid job at just instantly summarizing and synthesizing information from around the web. So Perplexity gives you answers that you can trust because it's always bringing in citations and it includes them in every response. So I'll actually use Perplexity, and I'll get more into this in a moment. I'll use Perplexity to surface initial sources with its deep research so that I can kind of do what I'm doing with ChatGPT or Gemini, where I don't have to necessarily spend hours going through all these sources, but I can go through and just quickly get a list of what might be the most relevant resources off the bat. With Perplexity, it also has limitations, so you only get 3 pro searches per day, and deep research is considered part of the pro. So I'm going to just continue with free, and then you can get this on your phone as well, which is honestly how I use it most of the time because it syncs perfectly with my browser. So deep research, you can see here there's an option here for research or search, and I can toggle to pro, and I can attach files if I want to. But if I toggle over to research, this uses up one of my pro searches for the day, which you can toggle on and off here. So you can try and conserve them if you want. But one thing I've noticed is that it will turn on automatically if you ask it a question that it can't handle without doing deep research. It will do the pro search. But let's go over to research for a second. And let's bring in the same question from ChatGPT, just so we have a better standardized comparison here. Now, because I've used Perplexity in the past, I know that it's not going to ask me any clarifying questions. So I'm going to include these clarifying questions up front. And again, that's just because I have my own experience with this. So I know that it's not going to ask me this, but just to have a better comparison with Gemini and ChatGPT, I thought that it'd be useful to bring in those limitations as well. So let's click go. Okay, so now we have all three of these running for the same problem at the same time. And I'm curious to see how this goes. It says that deep research for Perplexity also can take up to 30 minutes. I think this very much depends on the complexity of your question. I've had it sometimes where the deep research just takes a couple minutes, and then in other situations it can take a good 20 minutes before it gives you a solid answer. So what's cool about Perplexity that I'm seeing here is that you can have it notify you. So I think that will pop up and say, hey, your research is available. So that's a cool feature. Again, with Perplexity, I get 3 deep research or pro searches a day. Pro search is a generic synthesis across the internet, and it doesn't have quite the same level of details that the deep research does, but depending on what type of questions you're asking, the pro search might be good enough. And I can see Gemini told me it was going to be a couple minutes, but it's been about 10 minutes so far, and it's still searching. Again, that could be because I'm asking things like privacy policies, so it's doing like a legal analysis here. I can already see that it's bringing in Zotero, which is great. Oh, and here we go. So Perplexity is done. So for context, both Gemini and ChatGPT are still searching. ChatGPT's been going for about 15, 16 minutes. Gemini's been going for about 10 minutes. Okay, yeah, so Perplexity took about maybe a minute and a half to do this deep research. And remember, you get 3 Perplexity searches a day. And from my quick research before using Perplexity, Gemini said that you get roughly a monthly limit of 10 searches here, but I haven't verified that yet. So I'm curious to see what the research output is from each of these tools. And just quickly, I want to mention that I'm going to explain the NotebookLM Discover Sources feature, which is deep research in the sense that it's searching the web for you and it's finding a lot of information. But there's a couple limitations and benefits of using NotebookLM compared to these other tools that I talk a lot more in this video, but I'll briefly touch on after I do the comparison of these 3 tools. Okay, it looks like ChatGPT is still just going through and reading articles and then piecing together the different analysis. It's gone through 47 sources now. Perfect, Gemini just finished. So that took about 13 minutes for the Gemini to go. And what's nice about Gemini's deep research is I can export this to Google Docs if I want to. So I can just get this report and save it for reading later. Honestly, this looks super detailed and complicated. Okay, it looks like ChatGPT is finishing up. So I'll just click export to docs, see what that does. Okay, cool. So now I have a copy of this saved to my Google Drive as part of Docs. So that's a cool feature to be able to just share this reference with people. Oh, and it looks like there's an option to generate an audio overview. So that's actually one of my favorite features from NotebookLM. So I'm glad that they brought that in here, because now what I could do is I could generate this audio overview and it would be able to produce a podcast of 2 artificial intelligences having a conversation with one another about the report that I just generated. So that's kind of a cool way to stack the AI tools, because I could have this report generate while I'm walking around, making lunch, doing whatever, doing other research, working on my videos, editing photos. And then once the report's done, I could convert it effectively into an AI podcast that I could download and go for a walk and listen to this report to see what's the most interesting part. Okay, so this looks pretty intense, I would say. It gives a super detailed overview on all of these features. Gives an introduction, an overview. This kind of looks actually similar to what the Perplexity output has, where there's an overview, key functions. And let's just scroll down because I asked them both to give me a comparison table. So, okay, yeah, here we go. Okay, and here's the audio overview. So it's a 4-minute overview. So instead of going through and reading this whole article by Gemini, I could just go and download this and then listen to it, or just play it right here and then go find the specific parts of this research document that I'd be interested in, because there's a lot of information here. Okay, there we go. So ChatGPT has finished. To be completely honest, I think it maybe froze because it was stuck on that loading screen for a while, but then I just refreshed the page and it said that the research was actually completed in 15 minutes, though by my clock it took about 40. So that's a little interesting. But here we go. This is the best public AI deep research tool with comparisons and privacy review. And if I click on this button here, I can share this link with someone, or I can just read it as this separate window rather than scrolling through everything in here. Okay, so again, just quickly for context, ChatGPT said it took about 15 minutes. It took about 30. Gemini took about 10 minutes, and I was able to generate an audio overview in 5 minutes, and Perplexity took about 3 minutes. It's interesting to see how we have these 3 levels of effort, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, and what the final output would be. So I'm going to take a minute and just scroll through and see how the different comparison tables stack up. So it looks like none of them actually suggested ChatGPT Deep Research, which is interesting. ChatGPT itself suggested GPT-4. So that's a bit interesting to me that it didn't actually suggest itself as Deep Research when it did from the basic search. They all listed Perplexity. A bunch of them listed things like AlphaSense, SciSpace, Scholar, C, Site.ai, Consensus. These are all very similar across all of them. Then you can see it brought up the limitations, the pricing, the privacy and data, limitations, ability to handle documents. So it's going to take me a while to go through and analyze this, but this gave me a really great overview. All of them did a good job. I would say the speed of Perplexity on its own was incredible. The fact that it could do all of this in just a couple minutes and give very similar answers in terms of at least the overview as the other two, that's pretty powerful. And you get 3 of those per day, so that's great. With Gemini, I like that I could get that audio overview so I can listen to this as well, and that I was able to export this to docs. That's just super helpful for sharing. Though with ChatGPT, I can share a link to people as well. I would say from a depth perspective, it looks like Gemini and ChatGPT Deep Research did a similar level of thoroughness, though of course I need to compare that, whereas Perplexity was a bit more high level. So I think that Perplexity, especially because you get 3 uses of that a day, could be really good for getting an initial overview that you want to understand, for example, how different things compare. Like I ran a search a little while ago when I was making my how to run local AI in Obsidian video. I was comparing a bunch of different Obsidian plugins and how I could run a local LLM on my own computer. And Perplexity did a really great job helping me understand that. But it would have been cool then to take the output from Perplexity, give it as context to either Gemini Deep Research or ChatGPT, and then run deep research on these two with the additional context that I gave it on what I cared about from Perplexity. And with that in mind, actually, I want to take you over to NotebookLM for a second, because what I would probably do, since this is a lot of information, it'll take me a while to go through. What I can do is I can go over to NotebookLM and I can create a new notebook. And you can see here at the top that there's a Discover Sources feature. So I guess just to quickly show you this, I'm going to bring in the same prompt from ChatGPT that I've been using this whole time. And I can use the Discover Sources feature. Again, I talk about this a lot more in my own video that goes much more in depth on Discover Sources and how it can fit in with the mind mapping tool. But I also use NotebookLM as a resource aggregator. So I'm going to submit this. It's going to do a quick search across the web. And note that it's deep research in the sense that it's searching the web and going and scraping a ton of information. But NotebookLM doesn't have the same multi-step reasoning or deep research synthesis that ChatGPT Deep Research, Gemini Deep Research, or Perplexity Deep Research has. So effectively what that means is it's able to go through and do that very curated source discovery. It's able to cite them in reports and give you sources, but it doesn't have that same level of depth of the output analysis. So that makes it really good for finding resources with the Discover Source feature. So I can just click import here, and that'll bring them all in on the side. And you can see this one here didn't get brought in because this one is perhaps a paywalled paper. So if I wanted to, I could go to this website and grab the paper if it's available here. Yeah, here I can just go get the PDF. So I can click on that. And then if I want to, I can add this to my Zotero, which would allow me to just save this directly into my PDF resource manager, my reference manager, and then I'd be able to highlight and import those quotes into Obsidian. So I also have a video that goes more in depth on how to connect Zotero to Obsidian, and then how you can use that with something like these deep research tools to bring in the academic papers that you've found using your deep research and aggregate them inside of Zotero. So for example, I can open up Zotero, and now that I have located this academic paper using the Discover Sources feature in NotebookLM, or I'll go through my sources from ChatGPT and Gemini and Perplexity, any of them are academic papers, I can go and just click the Zotero button, and this is related to the limitations of large language models for understanding human language and cognition, and I can go and find my Attention and AI or Agentic AI library, and then I can just save this paper directly in there, and it will get added directly to Zotero where I can open it. And now I can go and I can just highlight, I can annotate, I can add comments. And then, for example, this is just showing you one that I previously used. I can import all of those highlights and information into Obsidian directly so that I can start using Obsidian as my note-taking software. So that just kind of shows you a bit of an academic flow where I can use deep research to find these sources and then download them. But let's just go back to NotebookLM. I'll delete that source that didn't work. And what I can also do here, I can go over to Add, and then I can just go to Google Docs, and I can just find my AI Deep Research paper from Gemini and insert that directly here. And there we go. I just added that entire report from Gemini into NotebookLM, and now I can go ask questions, or for example, I can generate a mind map on this. But what I could also do is I could go over to ChatGPT, for example, and I could scroll through and pull in all of the information here, go over to NotebookLM, paste this in here, and then I can click Convert to Source. That will convert this note that I just put in here into a source that I can now go through and ask questions about in NotebookLM. So I could go do the same thing with Perplexity. I think Perplexity actually just has a copy button. So I can just copy this, go over to NotebookLM, click Add Note, call this Perplexity Deep Research. And then same with this one, I can just click Convert to Source. And this got added to a source on the side here. And for example, on the side here, we've got a list of all the sources. Now that I've added the ones from Perplexity, from Gemini, and from ChatGPT, and I could go and I could select just those 3 sources. And I could, for example, generate an audio overview that analyzes those 3 sources specifically. I could go and create a mind map that's built just based on these 3 sources. So now, instead of having to go through and analyze each of these myself, I could use NotebookLM to give me a high-level overview or download a podcast, kind of like what I was showing you with Gemini, or have a conversation with it. Give me a summary of each of these 3 sources. And what's nice about using NotebookLM is that the sources you use here, the ones that you upload, aren't used in training the AI model. So that gives NotebookLM a bit of an advantage over these other tools because all of these would be using your data for training their AI models. So that's just something to keep in mind, that I think that ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, these are all really excellent research tools. But if you start to get into things that perhaps you don't want to be using or contributing to an AI model you want to keep more private, that's where I've been using NotebookLM. Cool, so you can see it just gave me this overview, which is a much shorter analysis, bringing in what each source that I got from ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity is talking about and how the different things compare. I could say generate a table comparing all of the tools in the analysis from each source. And just while that's going, I can open up the mind map. So the mind map here shows me all the different AI deep research tools, an overview of the leading tools for different types of applications. And again, this is just a really great way for you to be able to go through and break down the deep research reports and start to understand how they fit together in the different subcomponents, which might allow you to do better research and synthesis by adding in your own ideas. Now, just to give one more quick practical example that I'm going to run through all of these, I'm currently working on a video that explores the concept of flow states and intuition. So this is something that I've been working on with Feynman's favorite problems and the Feynman technique, how to master learning. So I'm working on the 3rd video in this series, which is going through my first favorite problem that talks much more about flow states and intuition. So now what I would do is I would go and say, okay, I've already spent a couple hours, probably 5 hours researching this myself for this video and just in life generally. But now I'm curious to see how ChatGPT and Gemini's deep research could augment the research that I've already done myself as a human, and then perhaps deepen my understanding of these concepts that are quite complicated, like flow states and intuition, and maybe start to bring in more scientific elements like neuroscience, which is something that I've been exploring in that next video as well. So let's toggle deep research on and say, how do the concepts of flow states, intuition, and neuroscience fit together? Also consider elements like inferential intuition, the default mode network, and the impact of mindfulness. So I toggled on deep research, click go, and it's going to tailor the research again. So it's asking, what is the particular context I'm looking for? Should I be organized in a report format or more like a narrative essay? And I would say I want both practical and scientific understanding. I want mental models. I want recent neuroscience findings, and I want it in a report format. And all of this aligns with the research that I've already done. So now, again, I can just send this off. This is going to take half an hour, and I can go work on the next part of my video, or I can go for a walk or make my lunch. And maybe I'll take this and apply it to Gemini and Perplexity and do the same comparison again. So next I'm going to walk through some example use cases, some practical use cases on how you can use these tools. And then I'll also give you a list of tips and tricks, some strategies on how you can use each of these tools most effectively, especially, for example, considering that with ChatGPT, you only get 5 uses per month. Gemini, from what I was researching, you get about 10 uses per month. And Perplexity, you get 3 uses per day. So there's a good way that you can start to begin integrating these together. And then, for example, use NotebookLM to aggregate the information into a single knowledge base for mind maps and audio overviews. Okay, so now that you've seen a little bit more on how we can actually use these tools, how they function in practice, I thought it would be helpful to walk through a few example use cases that I envision these being most impactful for. The first major use case is for comparison. You can compare different tools on the internet, you can compare history and pricing of these tools, the effectiveness of the tools, you can compare products, you could do event planning based on different options in your city. One of the main reasons that we tend to use the internet is to get data from a whole bunch of different sources and then compare them against each other. And that's one of the core features of what deep research enables us to do. So it's a really powerful use case. The second example use case is for up-to-date research, to check out current affairs or the news. Because you're able to use these models to research what's happening right now, it scrapes the internet for what's going on in this moment. You're able to get incredibly up-to-date resources and information generally that would be much more effective than perhaps like the cutoff date of January 2025 for the generic LLMs as they tend to operate. The third example is as a way to save money. Before you go talk to an expert, for example, a lawyer or a tax advisor, an accountant, you could do some deep research on your own for your specific scenario, level up your understanding so that when you go to actually talk to the specialist, you can save time and therefore save some money and also just get more out of that specialist interaction. You can level up your knowledge with deep research first so that you can experience the benefits of that down the road. The fourth example is that you could use this for competitor analysis. For example, I'm an intellectual property lawyer and a patent agent, and while I wouldn't use these tools for client work because of confidentiality reasons, and I wouldn't use this for patent searching because, again, confidentiality and potential issues with the IP down the road, I would use this for something like article writing. Let's say some new case comes out in law, and I want to write an article about it and how it's going to impact intellectual property law. Rather than just going and spending a ton of hours reading the case off the bat and perhaps checking what my competitors are writing about, I can use deep research to synthesize an understanding of the case as it came out and also do an analysis of all of my competitors that are writing about it to give me a briefing doc that would then help me speed up my writing. This would allow me to then write more articles each month and build up my personal brand. This could apply to anything, for content creation, for business, really anything where you want to be building up your brand by writing. You can speed up the research phase a ton, increase the quality of your research, and then increase your output to augment your personal brand. And the fifth and final, and perhaps my favorite example use case of deep research, is to use it as a crash course, to use it to learn a new topic, a deep and complicated topic very quickly. This is how I tend to use artificial intelligence most often, where I find something new that I want to explore, I want to learn, and then I get a deep dive very quickly, synthesizing resources from around the internet using a deep research tool so that I can level up my knowledge very quickly. I've actually made quite a few videos on how I use artificial intelligence to improve my learning, especially when connecting it to tools like Obsidian, Zotero, and NotebookLM. So I recommend checking out those videos if you're interested in learning more about how my learning system comes together. And now, with that in mind, as I consider my overarching system on how I tie these tools together, I thought that I would give a few of my strategies, some tips and tricks on how I actually use tools like deep research more effectively so I can save myself time, energy, and money. The first tip is to do your basic research first without using one of your limited pro research queries. Then, when you're ready, you can turn on deep research and ask a very sophisticated question based on your new knowledge so that the deep research is primed for success. This helps you conserve some of those limited searches each month, for example, like the 5 you get on the free ChatGPT tier. As another tip, after doing your basic research, you can ask the large language model, the LLM, how it would actually ask the deep research tool a question or if it's missing any information. Then you can optimize your deep research searches each month in the free tier because you're getting ahead of some of the problems that it's going to run into and solving them before using up one of your searches. As a third tip, you can do your research for the week as much as possible. For example, perhaps you could use the 3 Perplexity searches each day, the deep searches. And then at the end of the week, you can take all that knowledge, all that information that you gathered, leveled up your sophisticated understanding on whatever it is you're researching, and try and synthesize that into a deep research question for ChatGPT. Because you only get 5 of those a month, you can use the other tools that have more flexibility, like Gemini, NotebookLM, and Perplexity, and then conserve your ChatGPT deep research questions. I think this is also a good exercise in general for synthesizing your research as you go. So you kind of get best of both worlds situation here where you're learning along the way, and then you can use that increased knowledge to boost and increase the effectiveness of the ChatGPT outputs. I hope that this was a helpful overview on how you can use deep research in different ways, how these different tools come together, and what you can do now that the deep research tool for ChatGPT is available to everyone. You can really see how each tool has its own strengths and weaknesses, and some things like the 3 searches a day in Perplexity can really be more effective than something like the 5 limited searches in ChatGPT. Or, for example, you can also see how Gemini is able to save the docs to Google Docs, and then you can access it directly from NotebookLM, which might be a reason to use Gemini's Deep Research over ChatGPT's Deep Research, because you have that integration with something like NotebookLM and Gemini. It just really makes it a lot more seamless for doing your research flow, which is great when you're trying to enter a flow state and you don't want to get broken up by friction. And I actually talk a lot more about how I use these tools in different ways, how I use NotebookLM, how I use Google AI Studio, how I use Obsidian to synthesize my knowledge management with my note-taking system, with my personal knowledge management system, and how artificial intelligence can augment it. So I talk a lot more about this in my AI learning playlist. I recommend checking it out if you're interested in learning more about how AI can integrate with your note-taking and your research in a way that boosts what you're already doing as opposed to trying to replace it. If you found this video helpful, I would love if you would please consider liking and subscribing, as your support enables me to continue making these videos, so I really appreciate it a lot. Also, thank you very much to my paying members, as you have been enabling me to continue doing this to make my dreams come true on YouTube, so thank you very much. If you want to learn more about how I consolidate all of my research from different platforms, from different AI tools, and then keep track of those references in something like Zotero, then I recommend checking out my Obsidian and Personal Knowledge Management playlist, as I talk a lot more about how to organize all of this information in a way that reduces information overload. And finally, if you want to do a deep dive into the NotebookLM tool of Discover Sources, I just made a video about that walks through a bunch of different use cases on how all of the elements of NotebookLM fit together to improve your research flow, so I highly recommend checking out that video. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video.